Once upon a time, there were two boys. One of the boys was named Jonah, and the other was named Matthew. They both grew up in homes where their parents never got divorced and they didn't get into big fights. They were both happy and grew up in loving homes. When Jonah was about a year old, he started to develop. He could listen and take in the world through his eyes and other senses. So did Matthew. Both boys were constantly examining the world around them. They both had loved to play peekaboo, but they didn't fall for that anymore. After a few years, Jonah turned 4, and he began to learn about math and reading. He could count objects in front of him and start to do easy addition and subtraction with apples, blocks, or cookies. So did Matthew. They both loved to learn. They were starting to dress themselves in the morning, and they were starting to make choices based on what they wanted to do. Their parents would tell them not to hit or kick other kids because they wouldn't like that. But both boys couldn't understand how others would feel if they got kicked because they could only think about themselves. They would get punished, and that made them confused and sad. The only reason they stopped hitting their siblings or cousins was because they didn't want to get punished. A few years later, Jonah turned 7. He was growing in school and knew that pouring water into different shaped cups didn't change the amount of water that was there, even if it looked different. Matthew learned and understood the same things. They could start to do simple addition and subtraction without actually seeing the objects in front of them, and they were getting smarter. Both sets of their parents were so proud of their boys, and they loved them even more. When Jonah turned 12, he could start to understand many different types of math without a mental picture. He could add, subtract, multiply, and divide all in his head. He could also spell, write, and many other things that took lots of brain power and imagination. And Matthew also learned these things, and did just as well. Socially, they were both making lots of friends, and neither one of them got bullied. Both boys continued to grow and develop. They made lots of choices in their lives and made many friends. They began to understand the difference between right and wrong. Their parents had done a good job of teaching them that stealing was bad and helping others was good. When the two boys turned 20, they decided on their religious and political beliefs based on how they thought others should be treated. They had learned from their parents to treat others with respect, so that made them sure to believe in their beliefs based on their ethics. Through the teenage years and adult life, Jonah stayed much more close-minded. Matthew made many different types of friends, people with different religions, races, and sexual orientations. Jonah also had lots of friends, but he was only friends with people who were mostly like him in religion, race, and sexual orientation. Over the course of their lives, Matthew was more open to his peers, even though they weren't like him. Jonah was more close-minded and only made friends with those that were like him. Since the home they were raised in was different, both boys had made different things important in their lives. Jonah was comfortable with people who were like him, while Matthew was accepted and comfortable with everyone. There's a reason for that. Jonah was raised by his 2 loving parents, Mary and John, his mommy and his daddy. A picture-perfect family. Matthew was raised by his 2 loving parents, Mike and David, his daddies. They're exactly the same developmentally, and Matthew was raised by 2 men. Because his parents were homosexual, Matthew was used to seeing things from an open-minded point of view. Everyone in society sees that as a good thing, being accepting and open-minded. So keep that in mind when the next homosexual marriage comes up. Remember that the children are mentally exactly the same. Remember that the only difference is that in the way children are raised by homosexual couples are more accepting of their peers,